Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Sakline, Lindsay Kline.
Thank you for joining, everyone. This is Lindsay Kline with Sakline, SAKLINE.com. I have an awesome guest with me today. I am so excited to have Robert Ellis. He is an entrepreneur, the owner of Proelium Fitness. Did I pronounce it correctly?
That's correct.
I did it. He's also a certified personal trainer and just an amazing all-around guy. Him and I met recently and had probably one of the most enriching face-to-face meetings that I've had. Like, I went away from that meeting blessed. I will just say that. I had homework too, and I remembered it just this morning. You gave me homework with that meeting. And
Yes.
literally as we're taking our notes for this show, I'm like, oh yeah, I was supposed to get that done, wasn't I? So I apologize. I'm a terrible student. So,
That's okay.
but we got to talking about this really interesting topic that I now am turning into a podcast episode because it's that good.
Okay.
And it's that mind-blowing. It's about basically failing well, which is an interesting topic. So get into that. Tell our people what you told me that day.
Okay, so when we were talking about some of the things that you've encountered and I shared some of my experiences
Yes.
I've had, what we really want to talk about is how developing a healthy relationship with failure, okay? Because it's just like anything else in life where it's a part of life that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
All right. No matter what you do, you're going to fail. There's going to be things you miss out on. You don't get it right the first time. There are things you're going to fail, things you don't understand, you need to go back and work on. And the way you approach that can be either very healthy, enriching, and something that helps fuel and drive your progress, or it can be something that becomes this massive internalized stumbling block that comes back and it just constantly eats at you and tears at you from actually a subconscious level. So that's basically the whole topic. But you even remember what the homework was?
Well, I remember I was supposed to basically focus on my successes and not my failures, right? Is that about in the nutshell what I was supposed to do?
That's in the
like
ballpark.
at the end of the day, I was supposed to focus on what I did well that day, right? Is that what it was? I'm terrible.
You're good. All right. So what we were talking about was being cognizant of your failures, being aware of them as you do something that kind of like triggers that kind of pin twist, unpleasant feeling that you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. You're cognizant of it. You draw it into your awareness, and depending on the actual nature of it, the scale of that's going to depend on how you actually react to that and what actions you take. But being cognizant of those, being aware of them, and being brave enough to handle that, but at the same time, recognizing your successes. You've got to recognize your success and build on that. That's every time. I mean, it doesn't matter how small that success is. That's a huge deal. Every time you do something right, you really want to reinforce that so you can build on that. And that's something that I've found as a trainer, helping people in their fitness journey, is someone usually has that latent, ingrained stumbling block. And one of the big tricks that I use in helping my clients progress themselves and get to that level they want to be is we kind of pull that stumbling block into the light. And we find it, at some point we're going to find it. And depending on what it is, when we pulled it out, sometimes that's like unpleasant to deal with.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, I really would rather not think about that. I really would rather not do that. But here's the thing. you kind of got to think about it like you're that splinter in your side. You know, that splinter. If you ever get a splinter, best case is it stays embedded. It stays embedded, and every time you brush up against it, it hurts.
Yeah.
And then you start taking avoidance patterns to avoid brushing up against that splinter. The worst case is it actually gets infected and it becomes septic. Okay, so the same principle lies with when we avoid something. So, in all this, I go into some pretty good detail in the blog post that I wrote about that. That should be up now. And
Nice.
I'm sure we're going to have that link.
Yeah, I can link that. Absolutely.
Okay, so if we can link to that, that gives a little bit more examination on it. And so I wanted to go ahead and use that as a failure that I had recently, something that kind of got me, and how I reacted to that. So
okay, so what did you do?
What I did, I lost a client. I lost a potential client. And that's, anytime you do that, anytime you don't make the sale, you don't close the deal, you don't get the new client, you don't build that relationship, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
You
no,
know?
I completely understand that. And if you're like me, you get a little bit, I guess, emotionally involved a little bit because you spend time with these people. Right. You get to know their situation. You try to figure out ways to help them. Right. And so it's difficult not to take it personally, even though I know my bookkeeping company is not for everyone. Right. You know, I'm not going to be a good fit for every single company out there, and I understand that. But at the same time, I understand what you're saying. Like, you can take it a little bit difficult because, like, you've already poured time into these people, and then, and it's even worse if they don't communicate. If it's just like they're ghosting you, like, okay.
Yeah, so that's my biggest complaint of the 21st century is the ghosting thing. It's not cool. Don't do that. Yes. Let's be honest, because that helps. That helps us as a society as a whole. Be honest with the people. If you're not going to do business with someone, call them up and be like, "Hey, dude, no, it's not going to happen." Yeah. You know, but
it's not an easy conversation to have. But on the other hand, it's nice to let them know that chapter has closed, and they know they don't need to pursue it anymore, you know. So just out of courtesy, yes, it is nice when you know for sure we've come to an end, you know. And maybe it's just an end right now, you know. Maybe in the future it's something where we can do business, but not at this moment, you know.
And the point to make here is how you're reacting to that. If you react correctly to that situation when the client doesn't want to do business, wants to go with someone else, wants to go with another person, you keep the channel open to where you can possibly re-engage with that client in the future.
Of course, yes.
Right? As opposed to flying off the handle, behaving horribly, and then you burn the bridge not just with that client, but with everybody that client knows.
Right.
So that's something where developing that level of self-control is huge. It's critical. But to go back and touch on something you said when we were talking about that, you talked about the emotional involvement. All right. And that's emotion is something that we're all subject to. We all feel things. And as we said before, not everything you're going to feel is pleasant. Not everything you're going to feel is good. But there is a tendency to, when you have that bad emotion, you want to get away from it.
Yep.
I want to get away from it. And we're taught that you want to develop this positive mindset of nothing bad can touch me, nothing I am immune to all that nasty, icky, bad emotion. But that's just not true. And that's something I mentioned in the blog post. I had an emotional reaction to losing that client. It's real.
Yeah.
It's in one, like the splinter, you know, if I don't deal with it. As I realize that if I don't deal with it effectively, then it becomes embedded.
So
right.
how would one effectively deal with a situation like that?
The thing that just scares the hell out of everybody, and that's vulnerability. Okay? Having some degree of vulnerability, at least with yourself. If you're not ready to have that level of vulnerability with the people around you, if you're not ready to have that level of vulnerability,
so what would that look like? Would that look like you telling me right now how that made you feel? Is that what you're referring to? Like acknowledging the emotion?
Yeah. Well, in this context, in this moment, yeah, that's fine. I'm good with that because I already laid the foundation for that. What it was in the moment was actually giving myself the time to feel it. I'm not going to push it away. I'm not going to kind of push it out of my mind. I'm not going to dwell on it either. I'm not going to just kind of like wrap up in this and be like, oh, why I can't, I'm such a horrible person. How can I do this? But actually saying, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is legitimate. Then I go home. I write it down. I'm a big fan of name your demons. Write that down. Put it on paper. Get it out of your head, because otherwise it just stays something that's kind of swirling around in my head, and it's there, and then I'll be doing something else, and then it just kind of pops up, and I'm like, oh. But when I find that I've said, all right, I've given myself the time to do this. I've given myself the time to feel that emotion. I've given myself the time to write down exactly what I'm feeling, why I feel that way. Then I'm ready to move on. And then I'm ready to get past that. Then I'm ready to take on the next challenge, take on the next obstacle, and examine the situation objectively. All right?
Interesting.
Once you can engage with it and examine the situation objectively, that puts you in a far more powerful position.
Okay, so comparing what you were thinking and feeling in the moment versus how you're looking at that situation now. What's different about the way that you see it or think about it now as you look at it objectively?
As I look at it objectively, there were things that I could have done. There were things that I could have done in that situation that would have changed the possible outcome.
Okay. Possibly would have changed the
outcome. Could have changed the outcome. Nothing's for certain. What it hinged down to was another trainer who charged the same as me, willing to go to his gym in his apartment, which is a business model that I said, that's not my business model. I'm not doing that. The only way I can do that is if I charge a premium for a premium service. With that in mind, if it's the question of, do I change my business model to do, or do I just keep plugging on ahead? Could I have said something? If I'd have pulled that out of him, if I'd have actually stopped and asked the question when we were there, what are the considerations that you're actually thinking about right now? I might be able to help you with that. All right.
So possibly come up with a different solution.
Right. And if he'd have put that on the table, I'd have been compelled to look at him and say, that's not my business model. That's not what I do. Because I need to make myself available to more clients. I need to be available to my other clients. Otherwise, I'd effectively have to charge you for 2 sessions to cover my travel time to and from.
Right.
There are actual logistical concerns that I have to take into account.
And I think every business owner encounters these situations where you can help a client, but the way that they want to structure it doesn't fit, as you said, in your business model.
Right.
I often encounter that with my bookkeeping company, where either they want somebody to come into their office,
right,
like you were talking about, which is not our business model. We do everything remotely. Also, if they're working off of different software and they want us to use their software, things like that, where you have to consider, okay, is this something that I want to take on? Because logistically, as you said, it changes the structure of how you're doing business and makes it less streamlined.
Right.
So I think this is something that a lot of business owners have to battle with. Do I lose this business, or do I sacrifice my streamlined system? It really is like it's a strategy. You have to figure out what am I doing?
Right.
How did you decide you should have handled that?
What I should have done is, for one thing, there were a few things. There's other issues. I meant to bring that with me. But there are other issues there, like he had health concerns and he needed a medical release. I should have kind of mentioned that when we talked on the phone and said, before we will do the consultation, I need the medical release. And I emailed him the medical release. Should have been like, before we do this, I want you to experience the actual way I work, the way I engage with my clients, the things I do, because that changes everything.
So you could have worked with him in that first consultation had you had that. Is that what you're saying?
Had that medical release from him, if he'd have gotten it to his doctor.
So you're learning your process and what needs to come first.
Right. And it's not so much
You're changing your process.
I'm tuning my process.
Gotcha.
Is the way I like to think of it. Is because that's especially when you're first starting out, that's part of it, is you're tuning in your process of how you work and how you do things. It used to be when I worked for Gold's Gym, where I would have just this vast base of potential clients where you just want to reach out to as many people as you can. You want to sit across from as many people as you can. So you're setting up as many of these appointments, consultations as you can. And then so if they show up and, they're on this medication, they're on blood pressure medication, I can't work with you until your doctor has signed off and said that it's okay for me to work with you if you're on the blood pressure medication, because blood pressure medication does crazy things to you. When you start mixing that with exercise, you have to know what you're doing and what you're dealing with. At Gold's, it was great. I need you to get this signed by your doctor and then come back. And because they were engaging with the gym, they would get it signed by their doctor and come back. When you're dealing with clients and you don't have the big gym name, and you're not dealing with members of the gym, you're finding individual clients, it changes things a little bit.
It does. So does that mean your strategy has to change?
Of course it does. Your strategy always has to reflect what you're doing. Your strategy has to reflect your business model.
Right. Okay.
And you have to be really careful about tuning the strategy. When you start playing with that, you have to be really careful, because if you're taking a very reactive position, you find yourself thrashing in the water. Like that drowning victim who's just thrashing, limbs going everywhere and all over the place, as opposed to if you're consistently looking at the situation. And we go back to this. In this situation, it would have completely changed everything if he'd have had that medical release before we sat down for the consultation. With that in mind, I asked the question, would it be better for every consultation if I knew if my client had those medical conditions and had the medical release for the consultation? Right. The answer to that is yes. It would be better for my business. It would be better for my client. It would be better for everyone involved. And the doctors love it. They love seeing that come across. Oh, he's finally getting help. Yes. Don't do that. Don't kill him the first month, but after that, get him off the blood pressure medication. Then have fun. But so
if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like when you approach this situation, you let yourself feel the negative emotions and you work through that.
Right.
Then you can look at the situation objectively and ask yourself, how can I pivot to help this in the future not to happen? Right? Is that basically, in a nutshell, what you're doing?
That's basically, in a nutshell, what I'm doing. And in the blog post, I mentioned something that I learned in the Army called an after-action review. All right? So it may seem like all we did in the military is put on green suits and run around in the woods and shoot at each other, and then we pull pranks on each other and do all kinds of. It's
what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Army.
Okay.
So, but
thank you for your service.
Thank you. One of the tools that we use is something called an after-action review. And anytime we do an engagement that in training, and this is a training tool, we would stop after the training. Everyone gets around and takes off your helmet, and you engage with the observer controllers, and he goes around and he's asking, pointing at people saying, tell me something that went right with this operation. What went right? What did you do well? Who did something well?
Nice.
And then, what can we do better? And that's how it's phrased. It's not, what did you guys mess up? Which, if you know military, that's a little bit coarser of a question in the military. But what? No, it's not phrased like that, where it's, what did you mess up? It's, what can we do better? And that opens up all kinds of doors. Because when you sit into a failure situation, there's so many times where, especially as a business owner, in this scenario, you lost a client. You lost this business. Maybe you needed the business. Maybe you're already overwhelmed, so it's kind of like a blessing in disguise. But whatever it is, there's that tendency to go with it's not me, it's them. The problem's not with me, it's them. And that can definitely protect your ego. I mean, if you want to keep your ego strong and build that muscle, okay, cool. But at the same time, what's that doing for your business? Is it helping enrich, improve your business?
Right.
Is it helping you deliver value to your clients? And the answer is no. I mean, there's always something you could have done. There's always something I could have done. So I go into this process of the after-action review. And I get a piece of paper and I write the name of the event across the top.
So you're doing this every time you have a negative emotion about something?
No, this is something where it depends. Like I said, the reaction depends on the scale.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. So just like the really tough stuff.
Yeah, the tough stuff. The stuff where I'm like, this could tank me in the future if I had string after string after string of lost clients. What does that do to you psychologically in business? I mean, psychologically, if you hit there and you're like, oh, what is happening? This is so bad. Eventually, that drives you out of business. You go back to working for somebody else and fulfilling their business model. If you aren't willing to deal with it, choke down your ego, put that aside, and deal with it, then good luck.
Okay, so you get your paper out.
So I get my paper
out. What's your process?
I write the name of the event across the paper.
So lost client.
Lost client. I lost this client. I draw a line down the middle. And on one side of the paper, I write, what did I do well? What can I do? On the other side, I write, what can I do better? What did I not do? Okay? And those two questions are what fuels progress. Because, as we said, at the very beginning of all this, what was your homework?
It was to focus on the successes.
Right.
But I don't remember the rest.
And become cognizant of the failures that as they happen.
Okay.
All right. So that's what this tool does. Is this by doing it this way, I reinforce the things I did right, because you did something right in that scenario. And there are things I did right. I'm meeting with this dude at 5:30 in the morning, and I brought the energy that I'm supposed to bring to that, which that's a challenge.
Of course.
When you drag your butt out of bed at 4:30 in the morning and you're like, sweet merciful Jesus, why am I doing this? And you kick the cat out of the way and go get some coffee and prop the eyelids open with toothpicks, battle your way to the gym, turn on all the lights, realize you're the only one there. Only one there. Tapping in and saying, okay, it's time to go to work.
There you go.
And you bring that energy. In this particular case, I brought the energy. I built a strong rapport with this dude. Really wanted to work with him just because he was a really cool dude. He'd be the perfect 5:30 a.m. client.
Nice.
I mean, the one that you're like, I've got to get out of bed, but hey, I get to work with this dude, and it's going to be great.
Nice.
The other thing, demonstrated my technical expertise.
Nice.
Okay, because there's a lot of trainers out there that are people who follow the latest Insta model, the latest influencer, and that's what they're building their programming off of, as opposed to accredited organizations like the American Council on Exercise, the National Academy of Sports Medicine, or actual doctors in kinesiology and doctors in the field, where it puts you on an entirely different level of the service that you're able to deliver to your clients. And I demonstrated that to a degree.
I see.
Then we move over to the other column. I did not ask, all right, what are the considerations that you're going to be looking at from the ability to help you with that? Okay? And this is something that I do in sales positions I've had in the past. There's a lot of pressure from management to be like, if they walk away from here, you're not going to get the sale. You need to close them right now. You need to get their butt in the gym. I don't like that. And I don't like that either. I don't want somebody to do that to me.
No.
And I have
Treat
this whole...
others the way you want to be treated.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I don't do that with people. My objective is not to extract money from my client.
Right.
My objective is to, from the very first interaction, build that rapport, build that relationship. And add value.
Yes. But
even with that being said, helping them make that decision, it's critical because he's moved to a decision of, this dude will come to me, this dude wants me to come to him. Okay? Had I pulled that out, I'd have looked at him and I'd have said, all right, I understand where you're coming from, but we're talking about an extra 10 minutes of sleep. We're talking about an extra 10 minutes of effort. Is that really what you want to base a decision of this magnitude on? All right? So I'm going to ask you to think about, does this other trainer have the technical expertise? Does he have the experience training clients? Does he have the experience crossing the divide? Because that's one of the big things that I bring to the table is I've crossed the divide. I was 280 pounds when I was a sophomore in high school, and I hated every minute of it.
Oh, wow.
I had a 42-inch waist. I was not strong. I felt horrible. I avoided mirrors. So I bring that level of empathy to my clients.
Nice.
But here's this dude making a decision where the only consideration is an extra 10 minutes of sleep. Is he going to choose an inferior trainer for the same price?
Well, and if he did, he'll probably be coming back.
Based on how I handled it. So, yeah, but that's...
So, I'm as you're talking, I'm thinking about a situation with a potential client that I've been working with.
Okay.
And I recently had a Zoom call with her where I went over sort of our processes, and there were specific questions she had that I showed her how it would work in our bookkeeping software. And I had one of my employees come on the call too because he wanted to learn, so he asked if he could be there. So he was just observing. So I thought the call went really well. And, but then we get the ghosting thing, right? We don't hear back, followed up, tried to call, nothing. But my employee, thankfully, I try to keep a culture where we can be open with each other, right? So thankfully, he felt comfortable enough to tell me. He was like, can I tell you something? I said, yes, of course. He said, you kept interrupting her. I was like, I did not realize that. And he said, I think, he said, yeah, it happened 4 times. Like, he actually counted. I'm like, thanks.
Wow.
It's nice when someone's counting your mistakes. But no, I appreciated it. So he said, yeah, and I could see by her body language that she was annoyed by it. I said, okay, so that was something that, it was a blind spot, right?
Right.
Okay, I understand. Obviously, I got too excited or, whatever it was. I thought I knew where she was going already or whatever it was. So that was something that, okay, now I can look at it objectively and say, okay, now I realize I have a problem here. Need to pivot. I need to make sure I'm letting the clients finish their thought, or anyone, not just my clients, but make sure I let people finish their thought before I jump in and start talking. So that's, as you were talking about that, I was thinking, okay, how could I look at that situation and use it to help me in the future? So that's going to be my takeaway from that situation.
Good. And that's, once again, where you had a situation that was a failure. And I'm sure when a client starts ghosting you, you're like, for me, if they're ghosting you, whether it's a client, a relationship, something like that, it triggers that anxiety feeling, that overanalyzation. You're going, why is this happening?
Yes.
What did I do?
Yes.
Is it me?
Yes. And it may or may not have had anything to do with the interrupting. Perhaps it was something completely different. Who knows? But I can at least look at that situation, as you said, and ask myself, what can I learn from this to do better in the future? Right.
And that's part of developing a healthy relationship with failure. Where you're like, it's like anything else in life, where you say, this is a part of life that I have to learn to manage and deal with, and I'm going to manage and deal with it effectively. I'm going to go ahead and let myself feel that way. That's the first step. I'm going to let myself feel what I feel, but I'm not going to dwell in it. Then I'm going to objectively approach and assess what happened. And the fact that you have employees that are comfortable enough with you that they can voice a concern like that, and then you react by going, oh, thank you, and you're grateful for that. That speaks volumes for you, because we've all worked for people who do not have that reaction, where if you bring something to the table like that, then they're like, it's bad.
And they don't want to do it again.
And
that's very important to me, that we can have a culture where we can do that, because I know I'm not perfect. I know I have blind spots. I know I have ways I can improve.
Right.
So I need help with that. So it was good to hear an outside opinion on how it went, when I'm thinking everything's good, but then realize that, oh no, there's this big thing you need to work on. So
and that's cool. I mean, that's really cool that you have that going for you. So I definitely want to applaud you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
So hopefully in the future, I will get better about that. I think it's because my mind goes so fast. Like, I'm 12 steps ahead already, so it's like, I'm anxious to get there.
Right. And that's something that happens. That's just, once again, another part of life. So learning to slow down.
Yeah.
Learning to really focus on the moment, where you are, what's going on right here and now, is a pretty good thing to do.
Yes.
It's good to learn that. But it sounds like we're making progress.
Yes, we're making progress. Now, one thing I think I probably could do better is focus on my successes, because I think we all struggle with those failures, those things we did wrong. They get amplified in our minds, and that's what we think about. So I like your strategy of think about your successes purposefully, like intentionally think about those successes, so that it's not just what you did wrong that you're focusing on.
Right.
And I like that. Now, can I remember to do it? Apparently, I'm struggling with that.
Well, it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like, and it's a matter of awareness. You start with awareness. Okay, that's the first thing. There's a stage in diagnostics, in troubleshooting, where the first thing in any type of problem solving is being aware that you have an issue. If you're completely oblivious to the nature of that issue, then that doesn't help. So as long as you're aware of it, and you're willing to look at the small failures and recognize them for what they are and say, okay, I really wish I hadn't done that. I'm going to focus on, and there's a way to integrate this. So you can do this where I really wish I hadn't done that. I'm going to focus on the time that I did the right thing in that situation.
Right.
Okay. And that's another method of frame control where you're like, okay, I made this mistake here, but I know I've done it right in the past. So I'm going to slide, I'm going to focus on the times I've done it right in the past. I'm going to reinforce that. But if you weren't aware of the time that you failed that time, how are you going to make that connection to that behavior in the past? This is all interconnected. Yeah. So you're trying to make these connections, and then that's where you're kind of redefining the frame.
That makes sense. So. And to build on what you're saying, I think also not fearing failure. Understanding that failure actually can be a good thing. And I'm going to take from one of my personal heroes, Robert Kiyosaki. I love his books. Okay. And I've expressed that before, but he has this book called, and I'm going to butcher it probably because I can't remember, but it's something about why C students are the boss of A students. Have you heard of this?
Well, this is a principle that I'm aware of, and I think it's something he touched about in his Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, and it's been touched on by a lot of human potential gurus. And I can't pull one out of the air.
But basically the principle being that he talks about how C students that get the C grade, that's what it's talking about, right. Get A's or C's. So he was talking about how C students understand failure. They've experienced failure. Right. They know what it's like to have the failure and still be okay. Whereas A students have never experienced that. And there's so much more fear of the failure because they've never had to deal with it. And so he was talking about how failure is good. Right. You need failure. You can't learn to be resilient. You can't learn to pick yourself back up and pivot and grow if you don't have failure. So it actually was, basically his advice was fail more. The more you fail, the better you are, because you're hopefully, if you're doing it right, if you're failing right, you're learning from it and growing from it.
If you're doing it correctly.
Yes.
If you're willing to be objective about what's happening, if you're willing to actually go through the processes of seeing that this happened and not ignoring it, then but that's very characteristic of that achiever model, where someone who all I do is achieve, all I do is succeed. That's the only thing I'm capable of, and that puts a cap on their potential. That puts a threshold of once you get beaten, you're beaten. As opposed to someone, and I can tell you from my personal experience, I have been knocked down. I have been beaten down. I have been kicked around more times than I can count. But I just have it very much in my mind. When that happens, I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to pick myself up. I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to get there. I'm going to do it.
That's good.
It's like, if you can't wrap your mind, if you're in those situations where you can't wrap your mind around, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to do this, just be hard to kill. Just be really hard to take out of the game. Be like, I may not be the one who wins this one, but you're not going to win either. All right. But just the biggest thing is making sure that we don't attach the failure to our identity.
Oh, that's good. Okay? I like that.
That's because, and then once again, that's something that happens with the ego, where we take situations, habits, things that happen around us, and instead of recognizing it as this happened, this is a situation that happened, this is something I did, this is a behavior I exhibit, we say, I am this thing. All right. I could never learn to do a push-up I never had that upper body strength. Every time I tried, I failed. So I'm a bad athlete. I'm bad at sports. I'm just not a physical person. And when you attach that failure to your identity, that's so much harder to break loose.
Because that's taking it the next step, right? You're going from this happened to this is who I am.
That's right. And that is something that happens when you don't deal with it, when you don't go through the cognitive processes of saying, this happened, this is an event that happened, I feel this way because of this event, this is either the action I can take to correct this in the future, this is the time I've done it correctly in the past, and I know I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to do that. If you just kind of avoid the situation altogether, you kind of push that down, and it attaches to your identity. And then it becomes a repetitive process. We go back to the dude who's constantly losing clients because he won't sit down and dial in on the situation itself. I know this because I was that dude at one point. Okay? It happened.
Yeah.
It was when it finally dawned on me, okay, I've got to sit down and focus on what's going on here to really do this. So that's where failure is nothing to be afraid of.
No.
But it's something you've got to recognize for what it is. And that's where you get the healthy relationship. As opposed to, I'm not afraid to fail, and then don't be stupid about it.
Right.
Don't
Learn
be,
from it.
Yeah,
Learn from it.
Yeah, don't be rushing off, YOLO, let me jump off this cliff. All right? Don't be that dude.
It made me think of something else, too. I had a college professor that talked about how there's actually been scientific studies done to prove that your brain is going to find evidence for whatever you tell it.
Yes.
So if you are telling yourself, I am whatever, taking identity with it, right? I suck. I am not good. Whatever it is,
Right.
I'm ugly. Whatever you're telling yourself, your brain is, according to her, finding evidence for what you're saying. And it will basically go back in history and go, oh yeah, see, there was this time when that happened. And it's finding evidence. Whereas if you're doing the self-affirmations, right? Focusing on your successes, then the opposite would be true, right? Your brain's finding evidence for that success.
Right.
So I've never forgotten when she said that. So I really have tried to be cognizant of my self-talk. Not that I've perfected this to any degree, but I at least am cognizant and aware of whenever I'm telling myself something negative. Wait, now my brain's going to find evidence for that, and I don't want that. So even one of my employees the other day made a mistake and said, oh, that was so stupid, and he's saying his name with it. I was like, that's my employer talking about right there. We're not going to talk about him that way, even if he's talking about himself. But, just trying to be cognizant that what we're saying to ourselves matters.
Oh,
and we've got to change our own self-dialogue.
That is, that was big enough that Shad Helmstetter wrote a book about it. What to say when you say to yourself, which is
interesting. I haven't read that one.
That is one of the. I don't like the term self-help. I like the term personal growth. Okay, because that kind of changed the lens, the connotation that you have of it. But it was one of the first personal growth books that was out there, I want to say in the 80s or the 70s. But he talks all about self-talk, how you interact with yourself, how you talk to yourself, and how critical that is to how you view yourself and interact with the world around you. But you're 100% on point. And to take that to another level, the way I really effectively deal with that is I focus on a purpose. I keep my focus on the purpose itself as opposed to me. So that makes it a lot easier for me to separate the ego there, where I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And then it's a matter of those objective questions of, is what I'm doing right now reinforcing the purpose that I'm seeking to serve? And if the answer is no, okay, well, you got to be honest with that. You got to go take those actions.
I like that.
But that's the first, because the blog that posts there, that's part of a bigger series that I'm writing right now about mental toughness.
Nice.
Which is something we talked about.
Yeah.
But the first aspect of mental toughness, and the first article in that blog is going to be the finding a purpose, identifying a sense of purpose, and then reinforcing that purpose. So
I like it. That's awesome.
That's a whole other conversation right then and there.
Yes.
But it does tie back to tie it back to what you were saying about you find those beliefs that add into it. When you have a sense of purpose, then your mind is a goal-seeking entity.
Nice.
It is automatically going to look for things that fulfill that purpose. It's going to find things. It's going to go and do this. And this happens in crazy ways. Like, I've had sleepless nights where I get up and I just Google something and start following this chain down YouTube, and then I find something amazing. Find something that I'm like, oh, okay, this is a person that I've got to follow. This is a person that I've got to get with, and that's another level of certification to go.
Yeah.
And it helps me define my product and the service that I provide to my clients and bills. But it's having that sense of purpose and making that foremost. Your mind is automatically going to look for ways to bring that in and to integrate that into your life. So it's crazy how it works, but that is the first thing in developing any sense of mental toughness. It goes right along with what we're talking about, and it also helps you cope with failure.
Yeah,
because when you have that sense of purpose, okay, I failed this time, but I'm still pursuing this. How am I going to get there? So
if we could boil all of this down to some simple steps, it's I would say A, don't fear failure.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid of it. When it happens, let yourself feel the negative emotions.
Give yourself that time.
Not
dwelling, but we're feeling it.
Let ourselves feel it, and then look at it objectively. What actually happened? What can I improve upon? How can I pivot?
And what did I do right in that situation so I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater?
All right. So what did I do right? What can I improve on?
Yes, ma'am.
I like it. All right. Tell everyone how they can find you.
I'm online at proeliumfitness.com.
Now you need to spell that.
Proelium, Proelium, fitness.com. You can reach me through the links through here to my website. To schedule an appointment with me. I'm training out of the Trainer's Gym in Richardson, Texas. You can find me through that gym, or you can reach me by phone at 972-775-0593.
Thank you so much for coming today. This has been a really great conversation. I've learned a lot, even though we already had this discussion. Every time I talk with you, I learn. So thank you for coming. I really
appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And everyone can find me at sakline.com, sakline.com, or email at info@sakline.com. And of course, we're always here to help anyone that may have bookkeeping needs. And the phone number is 214-396-5020. Until next time, thanks for joining us. Have an awesome week.
By the Books is presented by Sakline. Honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Sakline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit sakline.com or email info@sakline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Sakline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.